15 years of experience in client success and client engagement team. So I know what you guys are all thinking. It's what can this old guy, possibly teach me about client success strategies, right? Since joining Phreesia almost 10 years ago, I started in a CSM role. So I started, I think back then we called it account management, but that was my my first role here at Phreesia. And since then, I've done 8 different roles, kind of all preparing me for the challenge that I have now in front of me as VP of Client Success. So I worked on, I ran our technical support teams. I worked on our early integrations and actually helped develop and build those for Phreesia. Through the years, I've had a front row seat to our transformation, and I've watched Phreesia and the client success organization as a whole go from what was really looked at as a cost center to now a profit center through our evolution, and finally, like Phreesia, I'm relentlessly client focused. So a little bit more about Phreesia. We've been around for roughly 10 years or 11 years. We're a healthcare IT company. We're 400 people. We've got a client success team of about 50. Our head office is in Manhattan, but our client success team is based out of Ottawa, Canada, which you may have already been able to tell. So go Sens go, for any of you hockey fans. And then finally, we're the market leaders in inpatient intake. So we check in roughly 70 million patients a year. We've touched about 15% of the U.S. population. So I don't know if any of you have checked in digitally for your doctor's office, but if it was a bright orange pad, that's most likely that's us. We're a patient check-in company. So I wanted to start by kind of explaining to you guys some of the challenges we faced at the start of 2017. So like a lot of you in this room, we knew what we had to get done. We for the first time we came to this conference, and we're trying to figure out how do we really move from this reactive state into and up the maturity curve to proactive and intelligent. Some of the challenges we had were our CSMs were jack of all trades, so we knew we had to focus on specialization and do things differently. Like I said, we were largely reactive, and the way we were growing was we were adding people to the team proportionate to our revenue growth. So we weren't really getting more efficient. We were just, when we hit a certain ratio of either new accounts or revenue, we would fire up the hiring engine and we'd hire another CSM. There's a lack of repeatable processes. So part of the jack of all trade, where we started was, everybody was doing things differently. It was really hard to measure the impact. Everybody ran their own playbooks per se. And then finally, determining client health was really manual and labor intensive. So I put the source there. I borrowed this slide from the Microsoft presentation from last year. I thought this slide did a great job of framing, when I was sitting in the audience last year, where we were when we started last year and where we knew we needed to go. So entering 2017, we had 3 main goals. The first is the goal we always have, which is to continue to improve the client experience. We were trying to be very thoughtful that we knew we had to make some big changes in the way that we were set up, but we wanted to do it without disrupting the client experience. We had to redesign the client success team for scale, and then finally, we needed to implement and measure some repeatable processes. And was just having a conversation earlier when I was here last year. One of the things that I felt would go a long way, and I didn't get enough of when I left, were some strategies and tactics that I could go home after the show as action items and implement and deploy. So we started with Tatango in March of last year. So we've almost been up on a year, and we spent the first quarter of 2017 implementing it. So this is really going to be the story about what we did and how we approached it to tackle some of our problems. So how did we do it? Three key areas. One, we focused on specialization. We brought in technology. And then finally, we did a lot of standardization so we could measure things and A/B test. So this was really the first thing we tackled. Remember I was saying that the CSMs were jack of all trades. So they were doing technical troubleshooting. They were doing low-value tasks. They were doing a lot of product configuration. It was firefighting, really reactive work, and they were just, they're basically, there wasn't. They kind of jumped from account to account, and there wasn't a strategy in place. So what we decided to do is focus on specializing in certain areas and driving to specific outcomes. So we started an early career program. Other parts of our business had already had this in place. It was more mature. But the CSA acronym, that's Client Success Associate, and that's our early career program where we're hiring right out of university or with a little bit of job experience. And that became our Q team and our engagement team. So the Q team, they're our product experts, and they're responsible for a lot of our product configuration. So our traditional CSMs, they'll open up client requests and submit it to the Q team. We'll take care of that versus doing it themselves so that they can focus on higher value activities. We have our Csa Engagement Team that also falls under that early career program. There are one-to-many pioneers, so we've got roughly 1,000 accounts or clients that we're using technology to proactively monitor how their usage and adoption of the product is changing. And then based off of this early warning detection system we've built using Tatango, we'll do weekly reviews of what patterns are we seeing and who do we need to reach out to. Technical account managers, that's the TAM acronym. These were our best practice masters. So they're basically there as resources for our Q and our engagement team to go and learn from people that are more senior that have been doing this for a longer period of time. They're responsible for betas and they're subject matter experts in advanced and complex configuration. They also help us with our largest enterprise clients. We have our CSMs, which we call them our outcome drivers. But going into 2017, we weren't really, we weren't focused on making sure that we were getting as much product adoption as possible. So we built our objectives for each of the CSMs around product adoption and then also utilization of our system, and we measured it in net adoption and net utilization. And then finally, our revenue generators, that's our strategic account management team, but they're really part of the inside sales team, qualifying opportunities and feeding that into the pipeline. We weren't really focused on upsell, cross-sell until last year, where we made a big bet and went to our base for the first time and really pushed upsell and cross-sell of our different products.
Is your product entirely cloud-based?
Yes, so we're SaaS-based. So this one, it seems simple, but this is so hard. We had client health, and we're a data-driven company, but we had all of this data in disparate systems, and the CSMs, before technology, they'd have to go and they'd spend more time trying to figure out the health of the client than they actually spent talking to the clients, which is crazy, right? So picture 50 people pulling their hair out, trying to figure out at any given time, how healthy are my clients. So when we brought in Tatango, this alone, when we looked at the analysis, probably saved us 5 to 7 FTEs in terms of work, so that we had health kind of at the fingertips, and we could make decisions based off it. And then we could actually have them on the phone having value added conversations with our clients. So one of the things we got wrong when we first started rolling out to Tango is we got overly complicated with how we were measuring health. And because of that, we had a lot of health profiles that were in conflict of each other. So we actually took a step back and we simplified the way that we were approaching health. So feeding into our system, we've got all of that disparate data. So now it's centralized, and we've got one view of client health across our different books of business. So green, you're healthy. You've got high product usage. You're in that 70 to 80% or higher range. You have no urgent or high priority tickets. It sounds obvious, but that was something that you'd have to go look up to try to get a read on. And then no drop in client sentiment. So this could also be, hey, we didn't have any escalations in the last 30, 60 days. If you're not at risk with low product adoption, you fall into the middle bucket, which is yellow, and we're constantly monitoring these systems to make sure that we're able to act on any changes in this health. Yeah, it was much more complicated. We were looking at different inputs to health. So we would have, instead of kind of 3, we'd have as many as 5 or 6, it was overstating a lot of false positives. We were having the system react and our CSMs react to the false positives, basically. Yeah. Sure. So good examples of that would be we were trying to manage like the work queue using health as well. So if you hadn't had a proactive engagement or touch point with one of our CSMs in a certain time period, we would say that impacts your health. But the problem is if you build in some of the tasks into the health score, then not all clients need you to talk to them once a week to be healthy, right? So what we learned was, you got to pull that stuff out. Don't try to make it perfect and enforce, your rules and your playbooks using health. Pull that out and really focus on what do you need to react to that's changing over time. And keep it simple, because you can always, this is just one health profile, but you can always make them more granular kind of as you go and as you get feedback and you iterate. Success flows, this was another big one for us. So automation of playbooks and standardization. Before we were very reactive. Over the course of the year, we have 15,000 proactive engagements, 2,000 executive business reviews, and then 500 early warnings detected. I call those pre-escalations. What's exciting about that is before, this gives us an opportunity to address something when it's a small problem. So we've got a task or a success flow into Tango that our CSMs can use that basically triggers one of these early warnings, and then we can act on it before it becomes a much bigger problem. And then last, campaigns. This is our one-to-many engagement enabler. So we just started this towards the last quarter of 2017. So some of our early successes, we have high delivery rates, high view rates, and our clients are engaged. We use this alongside, we're using Marketo. You talk about the stack, right? So we use Marketo for a lot of our general campaigns to our base. However, we're using campaigns into Tango to follow up on smaller segments of those larger campaigns, and then should try to drive engagement. So it actually complements Marketo, and we use both systems in tandem to help drive that. All right, standardization. So we've been talking about it a little bit throughout, but this was a huge game changer for us. I could call this was part of our secret weapon and lightning in a bottle. So we started by specializing and focusing the team on specific outcomes and changing the way our CSMs from a one-stop shop, jack of all trades, to focusing on specific outcomes. The problem is when we did that initially, each of the teams acted on their own and were grouped, and they were really in silos. They weren't communicating a lot with each other. So what we did towards the end of last year is we implemented this team-based structure and approach. And we call them pods, but really it's just a team of different types of resources. So each pod will have a team lead. They're responsible for things like the daily stand-up. They're responsible for they act as player coaches, so they'll give feedback to the CSMs and some of the more junior resources. We'll also have CSMs on those teams, Q members, so they're doing the configuration work as part of their pod. Stretchbook, which is it's a stepping stone into CSM for our early careers, where for the first time they own specific clients and they're responsible for the adoption of our product. And then the engagement team. So each of those resources is aligned to one pod, and they have a pod level objective around, and what we started with was around positive relationship activities. So they'll each have their own objectives around adoption and utilization, but as a team, they've got this team objective where they can work together. And what we found by moving to this is it totally accelerated the impact that our CSAs and some of the early career program had with our clients early. So they got a lot better, a lot faster, because they had access to more senior resources who could collaborate and communicate with them and work on different tactics within their books. So technology supported this alignment to the new team structure. So I don't know if how many of you are using Tatango, but one of the things that they recently added was this concept of team performance. So what we can do is each pod lead actually has their team listed with their accounts, right? And they can look at the health of their pod, and they can look at the health of the accounts within this team view, and then they can also action it as part of the daily stand-ups and things like that. Yeah.
How did you decide what's the pod coverage and what's the time on pod? Is it geography of
Good question. So the question was, how did you decide, or how did you set up the pods? So we did it based off of, at least with Phreesia, based off of practice specialty. And the other way we do it is based off of the system that they integrate with, because we need to be experts in the practice management and the EMRs that our clients are using. So we organized around those systems and around certain specialties, because that's where we needed to have to be subject matters experts in. So with this team performance console, each of the pod leads, you can see we've got some clever CSMs, because this is called Pod Steward. But they can look at the activities and look at the health in their pods, and then make decisions based off that. All right, so impact. So how did we do? So what was the results of implementing all of these strategies? The first is we doubled our capacity in our mid-tier clients. So kind of that big, meaty chunk of our client base, we were able to double the number of accounts and the amount of revenue that we were able to manage with a single CSM. We significantly increased our net dollar retention across all of our client tiers. So we moved from almost in some segments, double digits. So we're approaching world-class net dollar retention numbers for SaaS-based companies and in our industry. Of course, we reduced churn and improved our renewals, and that's by focusing on our clients being able to get in front of pre-escalations and deal with small problems before they became big problems. And then finally, we made a major improvement in our efficiency ratio. So we added a few hundred customers to my team last year. We started this year with the same number of headcount as we did starting 2017. So our efficiency ratio got a lot better, and we actually have more capacity still. So we're not really planning, or we don't need to grow the team faster than like we were before by adding a headcount as we added certain number of accounts or certain revenue. So for all of that, here's where we think we landed. So start of 2017, we were just coming out of the reactive phase. We implemented Tatango, went live on it in March of last year, and now we're kind of creeping up into that agile maturity phase. Since we got through intelligence, and we're really driving adoption, driving usage of our product, implementing playbooks and strategies for our different client tiers. So the key takeaways, what made it work for us, definitely the specialization. Technology helped us operationalize a lot of the standardization and specialization that we had put into place. And at the end of the day, we did this all without disrupting the client experience and making sure that they were happy and they understood the change as we were making it. One lesson learned that I will call out, when we were implementing the strategy, one thing we learned is that you need to be really careful how you switch account ownership with your clients once they know someone and they're comfortable with it. Just because we have a great strategy, they've got relationships with their CSM. So we moved our accounts around a little bit too much, too frequently when we were moving to this model. And we heard from our customers about that. So we adjusted, and now we're more thoughtful before we make some of those changes. So thank you.